If you think 3 lawyers can erase 80 years with one knock, you're about to learn why some doors should never be opened. The pounding on my front door echoed through the old farmhouse before the sun had fully climbed over the oak trees that lined the eastern edge of my family's land. It was barely 8 in the morning, and nobody who knew me ever stopped by without calling first. I looked through the window overlooking the gravel driveway and immediately noticed a black luxury sedan, another parked behind it, and 3 men wearing expensive tailored suits, each holding a leather briefcase. Standing several yards away with her arms folded and oversized sunglasses covering half her face was Patricia Whitmore, the president of our Homeowners Association. Even from that distance, her bright designer jacket, glittering jewelry, and unmistakably smug smile announced that she believed she had already won. I had seen that smile before. It usually appeared whenever another neighbor gave up after months of legal threats. My family had lived on those 83 acres for longer than anyone still alive could remember. My grandfather bought the property decades before the surrounding subdivisions existed, before there were paved roads, security gates, landscaped entrances, or neighborhood committees telling people what color their mailbox should be. Every fence post, every maple tree, every weathered stone wall carried part of our family's history. My father taught me to repair tractors in the same barn where my grandfather sharpened tools by hand. When people drove through the polished entrance of the neighboring community, they saw expensive homes and perfectly trimmed lawns. When I looked across my fields, I saw memories that no appraisal could ever measure. The knocking came again, louder this time. I walked calmly toward the hallway mirror and straightened the black judicial robe hanging neatly over my shoulders. It fit perfectly because I had worn it many times before, though not inside my own home. I adjusted the collar, took one slow breath, and unlocked the front door. The tallest attorney immediately stepped forward without introducing himself. "Mr. Caleb Walker?" he asked in a rehearsed tone. "Yes." He handed me a thick envelope. "You have been formally notified that you are unlawfully occupying property subject to an active ownership dispute. Our client demands immediate cooperation before additional legal remedies are pursued." I glanced down at the envelope without opening it. "Good morning to you too." Another attorney cleared his throat. "We're authorized to inform you that refusing to comply today may significantly increase your financial liability." Patricia took several confident steps closer across the porch, removing her sunglasses with dramatic satisfaction. "I told you this day would come, Caleb," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Your family held on to this place long enough. Progress always wins." I studied her expression for a moment before looking back at the 3 attorneys. Something about their faces told me they expected fear, panic, maybe anger. Instead, they found someone completely relaxed. The first attorney finally noticed what I was wearing. His eyes paused on the robe. Then they moved upward toward my face. His expression shifted ever so slightly. The second lawyer followed his gaze. The third stopped flipping through his folder altogether. Patricia hadn't noticed yet. She was too busy admiring what she believed was her victory. "Is there a problem?" she asked impatiently. None of the attorneys answered immediately. I spoke before they could. "Gentlemen, before we discuss whatever documents you've brought, would any of you like to explain why you're attempting to remove my family from land that has remained continuously titled for nearly 80 years? The tallest lawyer hesitated. Just for a second. It was enough for me to recognize uncertainty replacing confidence. Patricia stepped forward again. "Don't let him distract you. Serve the papers." I smiled politely. "I'd be happy to read them. But first." I slowly opened the screen door wider, allowing the morning sunlight to illuminate every inch of the black judicial robe. "Perhaps one of you should tell your client exactly why seeing me dressed like this suddenly made all 3 of you stop talking." The silence that settled across my front porch lasted only a few seconds, but it felt long enough for every assumption to begin falling apart. The tallest attorney lowered the envelope slightly, no longer eager to push it into my hands. Patricia looked from one face to another, confused by the hesitation she had never expected. "What is taking so long?" she demanded. "Serve him the papers." The lawyer finally answered without taking his eyes off me. "Mrs. Whitmore, we need to clarify a few matters before making any further statements." Her confident smile faded just enough for me to notice. She hated uncertainty, especially when it appeared in front of an audience. Several neighbors had wandered onto their front porches after hearing the repeated knocking, watching from a comfortable distance across the road that separated the subdivision from my family's property. Patricia had probably hoped they would witness another homeowner surrendering to the authority of the Homeowners Association. Instead, everyone was watching three experienced attorneys suddenly become cautious. I accepted the envelope without opening it. "Gentlemen," I said calmly, "you are welcome to stand here as long as you wish, but I suggest you verify every fact your client has provided before making another demand." One attorney adjusted his glasses. "Mr. Walker, we were informed that this parcel became subject to the Community Expansion Agreement several years ago." I almost smiled. "You were informed incorrectly." Patricia stepped forward again. "That agreement covers every remaining property surrounding the neighborhood." I looked directly at her. "No, Patricia. It covers every property your board managed to purchase. Mine was never one of them." Her expression hardened immediately. "Your grandfather should have sold decades ago." That sentence carried more truth than she intended. My grandfather had refused generous offers long before anyone imagined luxury homes would surround these fields. He believed land should never leave the family simply because someone with deeper pockets wanted a better view. My father inherited the same belief. When he passed away, every document, every tax receipt, every survey map, every handwritten journal, and every original deed became my responsibility. Most people inherit property. I inherited 80 years of careful record-keeping. My grandfather trusted paper more than promises. Every improvement to the land had been photographed. Every county inspection had been archived. Every property line adjustment approved by local officials had been preserved inside steel filing cabinets that occupied an entire room of the farmhouse. Growing up, I never understood why my father insisted that I learn where every document belonged. During summer vacations while my friends spent afternoons fishing or playing baseball, I helped organize folders labeled by year, parcel number, and county office. At the time, it seemed unnecessarily tedious. Years later, I realized he had not been teaching me paperwork. He had been teaching me how to protect a legacy. Patricia knew almost nothing about that history. She had moved into the neighborhood less than 10 years earlier after retiring from corporate management. Within 2 years, she had become president of the Homeowners Association by promising higher property values, stricter rules, and an ambitious expansion plan. Most residents admired her confidence. They saw beautifully maintained entrances, freshly paved roads, decorative fountains, and rising home prices. They never saw the letters sent to independent landowners urging them to sell before future development made ownership more complicated. They never heard the quiet conversations where people were warned that resisting the association could become expensive. I had received those letters for years. They always ended the same way, suggesting cooperation would save everyone time and money. I filed every single one away without replying. The tallest attorney finally broke the silence again. "Mr. Walker, would you object if we requested copies of your recorded deeds before continuing this discussion?" Patricia spun toward him in disbelief. "Why would you need his documents? We already have ours." He answered carefully, "Because if his chain of title is exactly as he describes, there are questions that should have been resolved before today." Patricia crossed her arms, trying to regain control. "There are no questions." I slipped the unopened envelope beneath my arm and looked toward the old red barn standing beyond the farmhouse. Behind those weathered wooden walls sat generations of records waiting patiently for the day someone underestimated my family. I met the attorney's eyes once more. "If you truly want answers," I said, "the first file you need is not in your briefcase. It has been sitting inside my house for longer than your client has lived in this county." The three attorneys exchanged another quiet look before the tallest one finally nodded. "Mr. Walker, we would appreciate the opportunity to review whatever records you believe are relevant." Patricia immediately stepped between us. "That is completely unnecessary. Our title research has already been completed." Her voice remained confident, but I noticed something different now. It was no longer certainty. It was urgency. She wanted this conversation to end before a single page from my family's files ever reached those briefcases. I stepped aside and held the front door open. "Gentlemen, if you have 15 minutes, I can probably save all of us several months." The attorneys followed me inside, while Patricia hesitated on the porch. She clearly did not like losing control of the situation, Yet refusing to enter would only make her appear uncertain in front of the neighbors who were still watching from across the road. She finally walked in, her expensive heels clicking across the original hardwood floor my grandfather had installed by hand more than 70 years earlier. The farmhouse had never been remodeled to impress visitors. It was built to last. The furniture had been repaired instead of replaced. Family photographs covered one wall, showing generations standing in the same front yard during harvest celebrations, weddings, birthdays, and holidays. The oldest black and white picture showed my great-grandfather leaning against the same white oak tree that still shaded the driveway today. Every image quietly reminded anyone paying attention that my family's roots reached far deeper than any modern subdivision. I led everyone down a short hallway and opened a solid oak door. The room beyond looked more like a county archive than part of a farmhouse. Steel filing cabinets lined both walls from floor to ceiling. Wooden shelves held dozens of neatly labeled binders arranged by decade. Survey tubes rested in custom racks near a large drafting table. Patricia stopped walking. "What is all this?" she asked before catching herself. "My father called it insurance," I answered. "He believed memories fade, but recorded history does not." The tallest attorney slowly removed a notebook from his briefcase. "How long has this collection been maintained?" "Since 1946, I replied. "Every tax payment, every survey, every permit, every inspection, every deed, every letter from the county, every certified mailing. Nothing has ever been thrown away." One attorney quietly whispered, "That is unusual." I smiled politely. "Not if your family expects someone to challenge 80 years of ownership someday." Patricia folded her arms. "You are trying to intimidate everyone with paperwork." I turned toward her calmly. "No, I am simply showing them why assumptions can become expensive." Her expression tightened. For years, she had built a reputation by overwhelming people with official language, complicated notices, and deadlines that encouraged quick settlements. Most homeowners did not have the money or patience to fight. Many accepted offers simply to avoid prolonged legal disputes. Patricia had learned that confidence often mattered more than accuracy. The problem was that she had mistaken my silence for weakness. She assumed that because I never responded to her letters, I had no answer. In reality, every letter she ever mailed had been carefully dated, scanned, and filed inside these cabinets. I reached for a binder labeled Community Correspondence and placed it on the drafting table. Then another labeled County Property Records. Finally, I carried over a weathered leather folder with my grandfather's handwriting still visible across the front. The room became completely silent. Even Patricia recognized that the folder was far older than the Homeowners Association itself. The tallest attorney looked toward me. "May we?" he asked respectfully. I nodded once. As he carefully opened the first folder, his confident expression slowly gave way to genuine curiosity. Within seconds, his eyebrows lifted, and the second attorney leaned closer to see the first page. Neither of them spoke. They simply kept turning one document after another, each page raising questions that apparently had never appeared anywhere inside their client's file. The first attorney carefully removed a pair of reading glasses before continuing through the folder, slowing down with every page as though he no longer trusted anything he had been told before arriving at my front door. The second attorney compared dates between two separate documents while the third quietly opened his laptop and began checking public county records. Patricia stood near the doorway with growing impatience, tapping one foot against the hardwood floor. "This has gone far enough," she said. "Those are only copies." I walked to another cabinet without raising my voice. "Actually, the certified originals are stored in a climate-controlled safe at the county records office. These are notarized duplicates requested over the years whenever the originals became too fragile to handle." That answer immediately caught the attention of the attorney using the laptop. "Do you have the certification numbers?" he asked. I handed him a single sheet listing every document request my father and I had ever submitted. His eyes widened as he compared the numbers with the county database now appearing on his screen. One after another, the records matched perfectly. Patricia noticed the change in his expression. "There has to be some mistake," she insisted. "Our title company already confirmed everything." The tallest attorney finally looked up from the table. "Mrs. Whitmore, who retained the title company?" She answered confidently. "The Homeowners Association." He paused for a moment before asking another question. "Did they physically inspect the Walker property records?" Or did they rely on county summaries provided during your expansion project? Patricia hesitated for the first time since arriving. I do not know every detail of their process. That hesitation spoke louder than any admission could have. I had expected this moment for years. The association had built its entire expansion strategy around assumptions, abbreviated reports, and convenient interpretations. My father taught me that the most expensive mistakes usually begin with someone saying, "That should be good enough." He never accepted good enough. Every time the county updated a survey, he requested another certified copy. Every time a neighboring parcel changed ownership, he marked the new boundaries on our maps. Every tax assessment was reviewed line by line before payment. At the time, I thought he was overly cautious. Standing in that room, I realized he had simply been preparing for people who valued speed over accuracy. The attorney with the laptop slowly rotated the screen toward his colleagues. "Look at this entry," he said quietly. "The Walker parcel is specifically excluded from the subdivision annexation reference." The second attorney leaned closer. "Why would that not appear in the summary report?" No one answered immediately. Patricia crossed her arms again. "You are focusing on technicalities." I shook my head. Property ownership is built on technicalities. Boundaries, deeds, signatures, surveys, tax records, easements, and recorded exclusions are not minor details. They are the foundation of every legal claim. The room fell silent again as another folder was opened. This one contained correspondence dating back almost 20 years. The tallest attorney read several letters without speaking, then placed them neatly back on the table. His professional confidence had transformed into careful skepticism, but this time it was directed toward his own client instead of me. He slowly turned toward Patricia. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said in a measured voice, "there is something very important we need to ask you before this proceeds any further. Were you aware that your association received a written notice about this property's exclusion nearly 6 years ago?" Patricia stared at him without answering, and in that single moment I realized the next conversation would no longer be about removing me from my family's land. It would be about why that notice had disappeared before today's meeting ever began. Patricia finally broke the silence with a nervous laugh that sounded completely different from the confident voice she had used on my front porch only minutes earlier. "I do not remember every letter that has ever arrived at the association office," she said. "That does not prove anything." The tallest attorney kept his eyes on the folder instead of looking at her. "It proves enough for us to ask additional questions." He carefully removed a certified copy of the notice from the binder and examined the official county seal. "This document indicates the association acknowledged receipt through certified mail." The second attorney immediately searched for another page and found the postal confirmation attached behind it. "There is even a delivery signature," he said quietly. Patricia stepped closer to the table. "Anyone could have signed for that." I folded my arms and answered calmly, "Correct," which is exactly why every certified mailing includes a complete delivery record. The county clerk suggested my father request those records years ago. The attorney with the laptop compared the tracking number against the digital archive. A few seconds later, he slowly leaned back in his chair. The delivery was confirmed. The signature belongs to an administrative employee working for the association at that time. Patricia immediately responded. "She retired years ago." "Perhaps," the attorney replied, "but the association still received formal notice." The room became uncomfortably quiet again. I had no interest in embarrassing anyone. My goal had never been revenge. My father always believed that the truth spoke more clearly when people were allowed to discover it themselves. That was why he never argued with threatening letters. He simply collected them, filed them away, and waited until facts became more valuable than opinions. Looking around the room, I realized I was watching his lesson unfold exactly as he predicted. The third attorney closed his laptop and looked directly at me. "Mr. Walker, may I ask you something?" "Of course." "If you possessed all of this information, why did you never respond to any of the association's previous demands?" I smiled. "Because every letter assumed I needed to prove ownership. Legally, I did not. The burden belonged to the people making the claim against me." He nodded thoughtfully. "That is a fair point." Patricia shook her head in frustration. "This is ridiculous. We invested years planning the expansion. We purchased neighboring parcels. We hired consultants. We approved engineering studies." "I know," I answered. I received copies of several public planning proposals. None of them changed the legal description recorded in the county registry. She stared at me in disbelief. You were following everything? Every public meeting, every filing, every survey update, every planning commission agenda. I pointed toward another cabinet. Those binders contain every public record related to your expansion project. None of the attorneys appeared surprised anymore. Instead, they looked increasingly concerned about how thoroughly my family had documented everything. The tallest attorney finally closed the leather folder and rested both hands on the table. Mrs. Whitmore, he said carefully, before we take another legal step, we need complete access to the association's internal records regarding this parcel. Patricia immediately objected. Those are privileged. Some may be, he replied. But if your board received written notice excluding this property and continued asserting ownership anyway, we need to understand why. Her confidence was fading with every question. She glanced toward the front window where several curious neighbors were still standing outside. For years, those same people had watched Patricia solve every disagreement with absolute certainty. Today, they were watching her search for answers she did not have. Before anyone spoke again, my phone vibrated on the drafting table. I glanced at the screen and recognized the caller immediately. It was the county recorder's office. I answered on speaker. Good morning, Caleb, the familiar voice said. We found another archived file connected to your grandfather's property. I think you will want to see this before anyone makes another decision. The room became so quiet that everyone could hear the faint ticking of the old wall clock hanging above the filing cabinets. I kept the phone on speaker as the county recorder continued speaking. Caleb, we have been digitizing several archived property files this month, and one of your grandfather's supplemental recordings was misfiled decades ago under an adjoining parcel number. We located it this morning during a verification review. I thanked her and asked the question everyone in the room wanted answered. Does it relate to the current legal description? Yes, she replied without hesitation. It includes a certified survey amendment, a recorded boundary clarification, and correspondence signed by both the county surveyor and the planning commission. Everything appears to have been properly recorded. The three attorneys looked at one another immediately. Patricia remained perfectly still. Can copies be sent today? I asked. They already have been, the recorder answered. I emailed certified digital copies 15 minutes ago to the address your father placed on file years ago. Printed certified copies are also waiting at our office if you need them. After thanking her again, I ended the call and opened my email on the laptop sitting beside the drafting table. Within seconds, the notification appeared. I downloaded the files, and the first page filled the screen with an official county seal dated nearly 40 years earlier. The attorneys moved closer without saying a word. The amendment explained that during a highway improvement project, county surveyors had re-verified every surrounding boundary. My family's property had been measured again, confirmed again, and permanently excluded from future subdivision annexation without the owner's written consent. Beneath that statement were multiple official signatures and recording references that matched the county database perfectly. The tallest attorney quietly exhaled. This changes the entire legal analysis. The second attorney continued reading. It also references the earlier exclusion notice we just reviewed. The third attorney highlighted another paragraph, and it specifically instructs future title reviewers to examine this supplemental recording before issuing ownership opinions. Patricia finally stepped toward the computer. Let me see that. She scanned the first page quickly before flipping to the second. The confidence that had defined her all morning disappeared with every line she read. I have never seen this document before, she whispered. I answered honestly. I believe you. But whether you saw it personally is different from whether the association should have known it existed. She looked up sharply. Are you accusing me of hiding records? No, I replied calmly. I am saying that someone made decisions without verifying the complete history. The attorneys remained focused on the documents. They were no longer trying to convince me to surrender my family's land. Now they were reconstructing how their own case had been built. The tallest attorney closed the laptop for a moment and addressed Patricia with a noticeably different tone than the one he used on my porch. Mrs. Whitmore, before accepting this matter, we were informed there were no conflicting recorded documents. That representation appears to have been incomplete. She immediately defended herself. Our consultants handled the research. They assured the board everything was clear. Did the board ever request the supplemental recordings? He asked. Patricia hesitated. I assumed they had. He nodded slowly but did not write anything down. Instead, he reopened the laptop and continued reviewing the certified files. My father often said assumptions create expensive lessons because they feel like facts until someone opens the right folder. Looking around the archive room, I realized every cabinet represented another year. He refused to rely on assumptions. He trusted records because records could survive changing memories, changing leadership, and changing priorities. The neighbors outside still watched through the front windows, unaware of the exact documents spread across the drafting table, but sensing that something significant had shifted. Nobody was arguing anymore. Nobody was making demands. Every conversation centered on verification instead of intimidation. The second attorney eventually looked toward me. Mr. Walker, if these supplemental recordings have been publicly available all this time, there may be additional correspondence explaining why they disappeared from later summary reports. I nodded toward the final unopened cabinet in the corner of the room. There probably is, I said. Because my father once told me he received a letter from the county apologizing for a filing error years after the survey was completed. I have not opened that drawer in almost a decade, but if my memory is correct, the answer you are looking for is still inside. I walked toward the last unopened filing cabinet in the corner of the room and paused for a moment before unlocking the top drawer. The small brass key had remained on my key ring for years, although I had rarely needed to use it. My father always referred to this cabinet as the final record, explaining that it contained documents too important to mix with the ordinary files. As I pulled the drawer open, neatly organized folders appeared exactly as he had left them. Each carried handwritten labels and careful block letters that had never faded. I scanned through several folders until I found one marked County Corrections. The paper inside had yellowed slightly with age, but every page remained perfectly preserved inside protective sleeves. I placed the folder on the drafting table without saying a word. The tallest attorney opened it carefully, almost as though he already expected another surprise. The first document was a formal letter from the county recorder's office acknowledging that an indexing error had temporarily separated the supplemental survey from the primary property record decades earlier. The letter explained that the correction had been completed, that every future title examination should include the supplemental recording, and that certified notices had been mailed to all parties known to have an interest in surrounding parcels. Attached behind it were copies of the mailing list and delivery confirmations. The second attorney slowly turned each page while comparing dates against the documents already spread across the table. Everything matched. Every correction, every recording number, every signature, every official seal formed one continuous timeline stretching back decades. Patricia remained silent. She no longer interrupted anyone because every attempt to challenge the records had only uncovered another layer of documentation. The attorney with the laptop searched the county database one more time before quietly closing the computer. There is no meaningful conflict anymore, he said. The historical record is remarkably consistent. The tallest attorney nodded. Our concern now is understanding why the expansion proposal continued as though these exclusions did not exist. Patricia finally spoke. I relied on professional reports. I did not personally verify every historical filing. His reply remained calm and respectful. I understand. However, legal decisions involving property require complete verification, especially when ownership has remained unchanged for generations. I appreciated the way he handled the conversation. He was not accusing anyone. He was simply following the evidence wherever it led. That was exactly how my father believed difficult situations should be resolved. Facts deserved patience. Assumptions deserved scrutiny. I reached for another folder and removed several photographs taken over the years. One showed my grandfather standing beside the original county survey crew while new boundary markers were being installed. Another captured my father shaking hands with a county engineer after the corrected survey had been recorded. The dates printed on the back corresponded perfectly with the official documents already on the table. The attorneys examined the photographs with genuine interest because they reinforced the written history instead of replacing it. One of them smiled slightly. Your family documented everything. I returned the smile. My grandfather believed memories become stories, but records become evidence. Outside, more residents had gathered near the road. quietly wondering why the meeting that was supposed to remove me from my property had stretched far longer than anyone expected. Through the front window, I noticed several board members arriving after receiving messages from neighbors. They stood beside Patricia's vehicle, exchanging puzzled looks while waiting for answers. Inside the farmhouse, the atmosphere had completely changed. The attorneys were no longer discussing demands, deadlines, or legal remedies. Instead, they organized the documents into chronological order, making careful notes about the sequence of events that had brought everyone to my front door. Finally, the tallest attorney closed his notebook and looked directly at Patricia. "Mrs. Whitmore, based on everything we have reviewed today, our firm cannot continue pursuing the position presented in the original demand." The second attorney quietly agreed. "We will need to reevaluate our representation after reporting these findings to our partners." The third attorney placed his briefcase on the floor and added, "At minimum, the association should immediately suspend any action involving this parcel until the complete record is reviewed." Patricia stared at the three men in disbelief. Only a few hours earlier, she believed they would force my family from land we had protected for 80 years. Now the very professionals she trusted were stepping away from the strategy that had brought them there. As the room settled into another long silence, a new sound interrupted everyone's thoughts. A vehicle pulled into my driveway, and through the front window, I recognized the official county car, carrying someone whose arrival would answer the last unanswered question about how this entire misunderstanding had ever been allowed to happen. The county vehicle came to a gentle stop beside the mailbox, and every conversation inside the farmhouse immediately faded into silence. The driver stepped out carrying a weatherproof document case instead of a briefcase, closed the car door, and walked toward the porch with the calm confidence of someone who had spent an entire career relying on facts rather than opinions. I recognized Daniel Foster, the senior deputy county recorder, almost immediately. He had known my father for years and had personally helped organize thousands of archived property records throughout the county. When I opened the front door, he smiled politely before looking around the room. "Looks like I arrived at an interesting moment," he said. "You certainly did," I replied. "Everyone here has been reviewing our family's property history." He nodded and stepped inside, carefully placing the document case on the drafting table already covered with decades of records. The three attorneys introduced themselves one by one, explaining that they represented the Homeowners Association in a property dispute that had become significantly more complicated after reviewing the historical files. Daniel listened without interrupting. Once they finished, he unlocked the case and removed a thick binder bearing the county seal across the front. "This is the archived administrative record connected to the Walker property," he explained. "After Caleb called this morning, I requested everything still stored in physical archives instead of relying only on the digital system." Patricia finally spoke again. "Can we please settle this? There has obviously been confusion." Daniel looked at her respectfully. "That is exactly why I came." He opened the binder to a section filled with official memoranda exchanged between county offices decades earlier. One memorandum described the indexing mistake that temporarily separated the supplemental survey from the primary parcel record. Another documented the correction process and listed every organization that received written notification after the error had been fixed. The Homeowners Association appeared on that distribution list through its legal predecessor organization. The tallest attorney leaned forward. "So formal notice was delivered long before the current expansion project began." Daniel nodded. "According to these records, yes. The correction became part of the permanent file many years ago." The second attorney reviewed another page before asking, "Would any future title examination have been expected to locate this information?" "Absolutely," Daniel answered. The supplemental recording became an official part of the property's chain of title once the correction was completed. Anyone conducting comprehensive research should have reviewed it. Patricia looked genuinely stunned. "Our board never discussed any of this." Daniel responded carefully. "I cannot speak about what happened inside the association. I can only confirm what exists inside the county archive." Outside the front windows, more residents had gathered near the driveway after seeing the official county vehicle arrive. Some quietly pointed toward the farmhouse, while others spoke with members of the association board who had recently arrived. The atmosphere no longer resembled a confrontation. Instead, it felt like an unexpected public lesson about how important accurate records could become. Inside, the attorneys reorganized every document into a single chronological stack, beginning with my grandfather's original purchase, continuing through each survey, tax payment, correction notice, certified mailing, and supplemental recording. Looking at that complete timeline spread across the drafting table, it became impossible to mistake one isolated document for the entire story. My father had always believed that truth became strongest when every piece fit together without contradiction. That was exactly what everyone in the room was witnessing. Daniel closed the final binder and looked toward the attorneys. From the county's perspective, the ownership history has remained continuous and properly recorded. The tallest attorney thanked him before turning toward Patricia once again. His voice remained professional, but the conclusion was unmistakable. Mrs. Whitmore, based on today's review, we cannot support any claim that challenges Mr. Walker's ownership of this property. Patricia lowered her eyes without responding. Through the front window, I noticed several association board members watching nervously, clearly realizing that the conversation inside had not unfolded the way anyone expected. Then one of the board members slowly walked toward the front porch carrying a thick folder from the association office and asked through the open doorway, "Patricia, before this goes any further, there is something in our board archives that everyone says you need to explain." The board member stepped inside carrying a thick blue binder that looked far newer than the records spread across my drafting table. He placed it carefully beside Patricia without saying another word. She stared at the cover for several seconds before slowly opening it. The first page contained board meeting minutes from nearly 6 years earlier. The second contained copies of correspondence exchanged between the association and its consulting firm. By the third page, even I could tell she recognized what she was reading. The tallest attorney quietly asked, "Have you seen these before?" Patricia answered honestly after a long pause. "No. I became president after most of these meetings took place." The board member nodded. "The previous administration transferred everything into storage. We only found these files after hearing there was a disagreement at your property this morning." Daniel Foster accepted the binder and carefully reviewed several pages before handing it to the attorneys. One memorandum immediately caught their attention. It recommended removing my family's parcel from every future expansion proposal because county officials had confirmed the recorded exclusion and advised against pursuing ownership claims. Another memo instructed future boards to avoid unnecessary legal expenses involving my land because the historical chain of title had already been verified. The attorneys exchanged another look, but this time there was no uncertainty left. The documentation from the association's own archive matched every county record my family had preserved for generations. The tallest attorney closed the binder and spoke with calm professionalism. "This matter is finished from our perspective. Mr. Walker's ownership is fully supported by both county records and the association's own historical files. We will recommend that every demand issued against this property be formally withdrawn." Patricia slowly removed her sunglasses and placed them on the table. The confidence that had defined her throughout the morning had disappeared. "Mr. Walker," she said quietly, "I believed I was protecting the interests of the neighborhood. I should have verified the complete history before allowing this to reach your front door." I nodded respectfully. Everyone makes mistakes. The important part is correcting them before they become permanent. She looked around the room at the attorneys, the county recorder, the board members, and finally at the photographs of my grandfather and father hanging on the wall. "Your family kept every promise they made to this land," she admitted. "I understand that now." Within a few weeks, the association formally withdrew every claim related to my property. The board approved a written resolution recognizing the historical boundary exactly as the county records described it. Future planning maps were corrected, legal notices were canceled, and the expansion proposal was redesigned without including my family's land. Even more importantly, the association adopted new procedures requiring complete historical verification before pursuing any future property disputes. Several neighbors later stopped by simply to shake my hand. Many admitted they had assumed the association's position must have been correct because it sounded official. They walked away with a different lesson. Official language means very little if it is not supported by complete facts. As for me, life returned to what it had always been. The same oak trees still shaded the driveway. The same farmhouse still stood where my grandfather built it. The same fields stretched toward the horizon, carrying 80 years of family history into another generation. Every filing cabinet remained exactly where my father left it, not because I expected another challenge tomorrow, but because preserving the truth had become part of our family's tradition. Looking back, I realized the judicial robe was never the reason everything changed. It simply caused people to pause long enough to start asking the right questions. The real victory belonged to patience, careful records, and the belief that facts always become stronger than assumptions when someone is willing to examine them honestly. Before this story ends, I would love to know what you think. If you had been standing on that front porch when those three attorneys arrived, how would you have handled the situation? Share your thoughts in the comments because every perspective adds something valuable to the conversation. And if you enjoy stories where patience, preparation, and truth make all the difference, consider subscribing so you will not miss the next one. Thank you for spending this time with me. And remember that sometimes the strongest defense is simply keeping the truth safe until the day someone finally asks to see it.